The road to the sun, when Florida was the land of dreams. If you grew up in the United States in the 1970s, you might remember the thrill of getting into a car bound for Florida. There was no GPS, just folded maps and signs promising adventures under the sun. Florida was more than a state. It was a promise, a land where summer dreams came alive, where every roadside stop had a story, and where the scent of oranges lingered in the air like a constant memory. The journey began with a full tank and racing hearts. Families crossed states in cars with weak air conditioning, listening to AM radios and stopping at motels with neon signs. Every stop was a discovery, a souvenir shop with stuffed alligators, a diner with vanilla milkshakes, and waiters calling everyone honey. Arriving in Florida was like stepping into another world. Palm trees swayed as if waving welcome, and the theme parks, still in their early days, felt like portals to magical realms. Before Disney's grandeur, there was the charm of Cypress Gardens, with smiling water skiers and flower-filled gardens that looked like they had come straight from a postcard. Florida in the 1970s was a place where time slowed down. Children ran barefoot on the beaches, hands full of shells. Adults gathered on porches, drinking iced tea and sharing stories of summers past. It was an era when simplicity was enough, and enough was wonderful. Today, looking back, the road to Florida wasn't just a route on the map. It was a path to memories that still live in every golden sunset and every salty breeze blowing from the Atlantic. And this is just the first stop on this journey through the history of the Sunshine State. St. Augustine, where America began to dream. Before theme parks and crowded beaches, Florida held an ancient secret, a city that witnessed the first steps of America. Augustine, founded in 1565 by the Spanish, is the oldest continuously inhabited city in the United States. Walking its cobblestone streets is like flipping through an album of memories that began long before the American Revolution. If you visited St. Augustine in the 1970s, you might remember the smell of salt mixed with Spanish moss hanging from the trees. The coquina buildings, a stone made of shells, seemed to hold stories in every crack. Children ran through the corridors of Castillo de San Marcos, imagining battles and pirates, while adults wandered craft shops and cafes with sidewalk tables. It was a city that didn't need special effects to enchant. The sound of cathedral bells, the creak of horse-drawn carriages, and guides dressed as conquistadors created an atmosphere blending history and magic. Even those who didn't know much about colonization felt that this place was special, as if they were touching the beginning of everything. In the 1970s, visiting St. Augustine was like opening an old book and finding living pages. School trips came in noisy buses, and teachers spoke about Ponce de Leon and the Fountain of Youth. Some believed that drinking its waters could bring eternal youth. Others just laughed and snapped pictures with Kodak cameras, capturing the moment forever. Today, St. Augustine remains a reminder that the history of the United States didn't start with skyscrapers or grand avenues, but with dreams brought by ships and preserved by generations. Remembering this city, we feel that America, before it became modern, was profoundly human. Miami before the glow, the city that learned to dance with time. If you visited Miami in the 1970s, you might recall a city still discovering itself. Long before mirrored skyscrapers and pop music videos, Miami was a tranquil blend of beaches, Latin neighborhoods, and a constant breeze that seemed to whisper old stories. The city was smaller, more intimate. The streets of Little Havana pulsed with conversations in Spanish, makeshift drums, and the aroma of Cuban coffee strong enough to awaken any dormant memory. Children played on sidewalks while adults played dominoes on concrete tables, laughing loudly and telling stories that crossed oceans. In those days, South Beach wasn't a global icon. It was just a stretch of sand where families spread floral towels and plunged into the Atlantic as if time didn't exist. The Art Deco hotels were there, of course, but faded and quietly charming. A beauty that didn't shout, just waited to be discovered. Miami was also a cultural meeting point. Cuban refugees, retirees from the north, artists seeking inspiration, all found a space there. And despite their differences, there was a sense of community. Parties were simple, with live music and homemade food. And when the sun set, the city seemed to breathe with its people. Visiting Miami in the 1970s was like stepping into a slow-motion film. Colors were soft, sounds were real, and every corner held a story. Today, looking back, that version of Miami, less hurried, more human, laid the foundation for what it would become. And so we remember that before the glow, there were roots, and those roots still live in every sunset over Biscayne Bay. The town's time forgot, rural Florida. Long before gated communities and shiny malls, Florida was made of small towns where time seemed to move slowly. Places like Micanopy, Monticello, and Sebring held an essence now found only in memories. They were communities where everyone knew each other by name, and the loudest sound was the church bell or a distant train whistle. Traveling through rural Florida in the 1970s was like flipping through a sepia-toned photo album. Roads were lined with orange groves and quiet pastures. Children played on swings hung from century-old trees, while adults chatted on porches, fanning themselves with makeshift fans and telling stories that mixed fact and legend. Local shops sold everything, from nails to ice cream, and owners knew exactly what each customer liked. Movie theaters had just one screen, and films were events that gathered entire families. And when there was a fair in town, it felt as if the whole world gathered there. Candy stalls, live music, and the unmistakable smell of roasted corn. These towns were the heart of Florida. They didn't have famous beaches or theme parks, but they had soul. Stories were etched into every wooden post and park bench. Even those who passed through quickly felt something special, a treasure that couldn't be bought, only lived. Today, many of these towns still exist, but quieter, with fewer voices. Some have become destinations for those seeking the charm of the past. Others persist in silence, waiting for someone to return and hear their stories. Remembering them, we realize that true Florida isn't just in attractions, it's in the roots that sustain its memory. Orlando. Before the magic, when Florida was just fields and silence. Before enchanted castles and nighttime fireworks, Orlando was just a city surrounded by orange groves and calm lakes. In the 1960s and early 1970s, few could imagine that this quiet corner of central Florida would become the epicenter of American fantasy. But for those who lived through the transition, the memory is vivid and full of nostalgia. Orlando was the kind of place where time seemed to stretch. Mornings began with the sound of birds and distant tractors. Children fished in lakes with makeshift rods, and adults chatted in local grocery stores where the smell of fresh bread mingled with gasoline. It was a small city with a big soul. When Walt Disney announced plans to build a theme park there, many doubted it. But soon trucks arrived, roads were built, and silence gave way to anticipation. In 1971, Magic Kingdom opened its doors, and Orlando was never the same. For early visitors, the experience was almost surreal. The park was modest but full of charm. Lines were shorter, characters seemed closer, and every attraction was a discovery. Families took pictures with film cameras, and smiles were genuine, as if everyone knew they were experiencing something unique. Yet even with the arrival of magic, Orlando retained part of its essence. Old neighborhoods still had wooden houses and wide porches. Lakes reflected the afternoon sky, and longtime residents told stories of when it was all just fields. Today, looking back, we realize that the true magic of Orlando wasn't just in the parks. It was in the quiet transformation of a city, learning to dream big without forgetting its roots. Cape Canaveral, where Florida reached for the stars. In the 1970s, there was a place in Florida where the sky wasn't the limit, it was just the beginning. Cape Canaveral wasn't just a point on the map, it was a portal. A place where the ground shook with the roar of rockets and hearts raced with the hope of witnessing the impossible. Here, between concrete and sea, the American dream met the universe. Visiting the Kennedy Space Center back then was like stepping onto another planet. Wide-eyed children tried to understand how something so heavy could fly. Adults, even without technical knowledge, felt a quiet pride. Each launch felt like a shared victory, a step for humanity, with an American accent and Floridian roots. School trips arrived in noisy buses, full of students in colorful t-shirts with cameras around their necks. Guides spoke enthusiastically about the Saturn V, Apollo capsules, and astronauts who became legends. Tang was sold at the cafeterias, and many believed drinking the orange powder brought them closer to space travelers. It was a mix of science, fantasy, and patriotism, packed in concrete, metal, and smoke. On launch days, nearby beaches filled with spectators, families spread towels on the sand, radios broadcasted the countdown, and when the rocket lifted off, silence gave way to applause, cheers, and tears. It was impossible not to be moved. Florida, at that moment, was more than a state. It was humanity's springboard, and there was something magical in the wait. The deep rumble before the launch, the brightness cutting across the sky, the echo that seemed to resonate inside the chest. It was as if everyone there shared the same feeling, witnessing something bigger than themselves. Today, remembering Cape Canaveral in the 1970s, we realize that time was more than historic. It was intimate. Florida showed that it could be more than sun and sea. It could be the starting point for infinity, and even though the rockets have changed and the names are different, that feeling still lives. It's in yellowed photos, tickets stored in shoeboxes, and stories told by those who saw the sky open. Because Florida didn't just touch the stars, it taught an entire generation to believe they were within reach. The Everglades, Florida's forgotten wild whisper. In the 1970s, visiting the Everglades was like entering a world that didn't follow clocks. The vast swamps, silent cypresses, and the slow flight of herons created an atmosphere blending mystery and peace. It was Florida, in its rawest and most beautiful form. Families venturing there didn't encounter lines or tickets. They found wooden trails, propeller boats, and guides who spoke with reverence about alligators, panthers, and mangroves. The air was humid, the ground seemed to breathe, and every sound, a snap, a call, a movement in the water, told an ancient story. Children gazed into alligator eyes with awe and fear. Adults snapped pictures with analog cameras, trying to capture what could only be felt. And when the sun began to set, the sky transformed into a living painting, reflected in calm waters, like a mirror of time. The Everglades were more than a park. They were a reminder that Florida had deep roots long before resorts and condos. It was a place where nature still set the rules, and silence had value. Locals shared stories of rare animal encounters, trails leading to forgotten places, and nights when the sound of insects was the only companion. Today, remembering the Everglades of the 1970s, we feel that time was a pause, a chance to see Florida as it truly was. Wild, serene, and full of secrets. And even though the world has changed, that whisper still lives in every breeze passing through the mangroves. Roadside attractions, when Florida was a park without gates. In the 1970s, traveling through Florida was an adventure that began long before reaching the final destination. The roads were dotted with curious, exaggerated, and unforgettable attractions. Every mile seemed to hide a surprise, and every stop was a story waiting to be lived. There was Gatorland, with its crocodile-shaped gates, promising encounters with giant reptiles, and shows blending courage and humor. Further along, Weeki Springs enchanted visitors with real mermaids swimming in crystal-clear waters as if lifted from a fairy tale. And at Cypress Gardens, smiling water skiers glided across lakes surrounded by flower-filled gardens and colorful costumes. These attractions didn't need advanced technology. All they needed was a creative idea, a bit of exaggeration, and lots of passion. Billboards grabbed attention with bold phrases and vibrant illustrations. Children begged to stop, and parents, though tired, gave in, knowing those moments would become memories. Souvenir shops sold everything: t-shirts with alligators, snow globes with flamingos, and postcards that looked like paintings. Restaurants served fried chicken, key lime pie, and sodas in paper cups with colorful logos. Each stop had something unique: a giant statue, a strange museum, or a guide telling stories with sparkling eyes. Today, many of these attractions have disappeared or been swallowed by time, but those who lived that era know Florida's real magic was on the roads, in unexpected detours, colorful signs, and the feeling that any place could be special. Remembering these trips, we realize Florida was, above all, an invitation to curiosity, a land where every turn could hide a wonder. The beaches that shaped summer, when the sea was our playground. In the 1970s, Florida's beaches were more than destinations. They were rituals. Every summer brought the promise of warm sand, gentle waves, and afternoons that seemed to last forever. It was a time when the sea didn't need to compete with technology. Simply being there, blue and endless, made everything worthwhile. Destinations like Clearwater, Daytona, Cocoa, and Siesta Key were names that sparked smiles. Families arrived in packed cars, surfboards tied to the roof, coolers filled with sandwiches and soda. Children ran straight to the water, fearless, carefree. Adults spread floral towels and set up umbrellas, dancing in the wind. The sound of the waves mingled with portable radios playing the hits of the day. There was something magical in listening to music while the sun gilded your skin and salt stuck to your hair. Conversations were light, laughter easy, and every evening brought the silent spectacle of the sunset, a moment that seemed to pause time. Stalls sold popsicles, fries, and simple souvenirs, shell bracelets, faded print t-shirts, and postcards attempting to capture what only the heart could hold. And when night fell, boardwalk strolls revealed soft lights, the smell of seafood, and distant bands playing for anyone who wanted to listen. Today, remembering Florida's beaches of the 1970s, we feel that summer never ended. It lives in every grain of sand trapped in a backpack, in every yellowed photo tucked away in a drawer, and in every memory that returns when the scent of the sea fills the air. Florida, at that time, was more than a place. It was a feeling, and summer was its most beautiful language. Diners and cafes, the flavor that stopped the road. In the 1970s, traveling through Florida meant more than reaching your destination. It meant stopping, and nothing stopped a journey like a good roadside diner. These were places where time seemed frozen between chrome counters, red vinyl booths, and waiters calling everyone "darlin'." These diners were meeting points, refugees, and above all, memories in the making. The smell of bacon in the air, the sizzle on the grill, and the clinking of coffee cups created a soundtrack many still remember. Children chose strawberry milkshakes, adults ordered apple pie with a scoop of ice cream, and everyone knew that moment was special. Menus were simple but complete: towering burgers, crispy fries, all-day pancakes, and pies worthy of local contests. There was comfort in knowing that no matter where you were in Florida, a diner awaited with neon lights and a welcoming smile. Some of these places had names that now sound like poetry: Sunshine Grill, Gator Diner, Orange Blossom Cafe. And even though many have disappeared, their rusted signs can still be seen along back roads. Gentle ghosts of an era that didn't want to be forgotten. Families gathered in booths, laughing, eating, and planning the next leg of the journey. When the check came, it brought a sense that the little restaurant had offered more than food. It had offered a pause, a connection, a memory. Remembering Florida's diners of the 1970s, we realized the flavor of the journey wasn't just on the plate. Every stop said, "We are together, we are alive, and we are savoring the road." Communities of tranquility, when Florida became a refuge. In the 1970s, Florida began to transform into more than a tourist destination. It became a refuge. For thousands of Americans seeking rest, sun, and a simpler life, Florida offered exactly that, with a charm that only time can preserve. Cities like Ocala, Venice, and the Villages started attracting retirees from across the country. They were places where the pace was slow. Mornings began with gentle walks, and afternoons ended with card games and iced tea. Homes had wide porches, well-kept gardens, and neighbors who quickly became friends. These communities were more than neighborhoods. They were small worlds where life felt lighter. Social clubs offered dance classes, bingo, painting, and even gardening. There was always a celebration happening. Birthdays, barbecues, simple parties that colored the days. Local markets sold fresh produce, and cafes served homemade pies reminiscent of childhood. Streets were quiet, bicycles circulated, and birds sang. Even visitors from big cities felt that here they could finally breathe. For children and grandchildren visiting, it was like stepping into a slow-motion film. Hugs lasted longer, conversations were deeper, and each visit left a mark. Many still keep photos in front of striped awnings, with smiles saying, "Here, everything is all right." Today, remembering Florida's retiree communities in the 1970s, we feel that time was a celebration of simplicity, a reminder that happiness can dwell in a peaceful routine, a shared sunset, and a neighborhood that knows the value of togetherness. The Florida we lived when the past was present. In the 1970s, Florida wasn't just a place on the map. It was a feeling, a state of mind blending warmth, freedom, and a simplicity that now seems almost impossible. For those who lived through it, every detail, no matter how small, became memory. It was the sound of the landline ringing in the kitchen, calls coming from afar with beloved voices, the plush carpet underfoot where children flopped as if on clouds, the taste of Tang, making anyone feel part of the space race, and Star Wars toys that fit in your pocket and carried imagination to distant galaxies. Tupperware parties brought neighbors together around colorful bowls and genuine laughter. Bell-bottom pants swayed in the streets, accompanied by music that still echoes in memory. And television, with its limited programming, created family rituals, like sitting together to watch the Brady Bunch and forgetting for a few minutes the world outside. Florida was made of bold colors, cars without air conditioning, garden hoses turning yards into water parks, of silly trading cards, roasted corn, and wine bottles with melted candles as decoration, of gatherings, discoveries, a childhood that seemed to last forever. Today, looking back, we realize that 1970s Florida wasn't just a phase, it was a way of life, a way to see the world with curious eyes and an open heart. And even though everything has changed, that time still lives, in yellowed photos, stories told over dinner, and in the nostalgia that insists on returning. Because Florida back then was more than sun and sea, it was home. If these memories touched you, if some image, sound, or scent of old Florida still lives in your heart, then this video was made for you. Florida's story isn't just in books, it's in our memories, our family trips, summer afternoons that felt endless. If you enjoyed this journey through time, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next episodes. It helps us keep bringing stories that deserve to be remembered. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching our videos from? Which part of Florida marked your childhood or your life? Let's build this map of memories together, because here every memory matters and every story deserves to